The next question: what is the significance of Mano, which we call cognitive process, and Chitta, which we call affective process? Okay, so in order to understand this, we have to take a look at what the Buddha said about the mind, right? So first, let's listen to what Bante's explanation about thinking versus emotions, right?
When we speak about the mind, we really have two minds. Most people don't know that. One mind is the thinking mind. The other mind is the emotional mind. Now the thinking mind can think, but it is the emotional mind that wants things or hates things or fears things or worries about things. That is the emotional mind. Now when you come to the temple and say take up the 5 precepts, it is the thinking mind that is doing that. But you go home and maybe you quarrel with your husband or wife or whoever, or maybe neighbors, or why is that? That is done by the emotional mind, not the thinking mind. And so, even if we understand, when you read the book, you understand everything, your understanding is done by the thinking mind. But you cannot live according to your understanding because the emotional mind goes in the opposite direction. Today, the thinking mind in the modern world is much more advanced than the primitive world. That is why we have electric lights, we have fans, we have air conditioning, we have motor vehicles to go about, we have airplanes even to fly to other countries. Now people have even gone to the moon, and now they are trying to go even beyond the moon. We have this wonderful thing called a computer. All this is because of the thinking mind. It is the thinking mind that has done all these things, wonderful things. But still, are we free from crime? Are we free from wars? Are we free from terrorism, injustice? Why all these things? Because the emotional mind is dominating the world today. The thinking mind is only a slave of the emotional mind. This is why the thinking mind has created the nuclear weapons that can even destroy the world. Because everything that the thinking mind has done is what the emotional mind wants. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that what we need is to start working according to the thinking mind and not the emotional mind. That the thinking mind should dominate the world, not the emotional mind. The emotional mind has to learn to control. The thinking mind has to learn to control the emotional mind. That is the important thing. And that is what we learn in the teachings of the Buddha. What we call meditation is learning to gain control over the emotional mind. To start working according to the thinking mind and not according to the emotional mind.
So Bhante was talking about the emotional mind is the one that is disturbing us, and we have not been using thinking mind very wisely. Later on in the next question, I'm going to explain about why the emotional mind is always controlling the thinking mind. There is a scientific explanation, so hang on for that, because it's very important to realize the reason why emotions are always controlling the thinking. There is a powerful scientific explanation I will come to in a moment. So now the Buddha used 3 words to describe the mind. The first word he used is vijnana. Vijnana is referring to this process of perception arising because of the panchakanda, the 5 aggregates. So this is really the process of perception, producing a mental image because our sense organs picked up stimulations from the environment. So light enters the eye, sound enters the ear, right? And aroma enters the nose, and flavors come into contact with the tongue, and tangible objects come into contact with the body. We experience that, and then there's a mental image arising. All this is bringing our mind to the awareness or the perception of objects in the environment. That is called vijnana. And therefore, vijnana is often translated as consciousness. Well, in terms of the sense organ, it is not consciousness, it is just perception. But consciousness is the correct word to use in terms of the 6th sense, the mind. We have 5 physical senses plus the mind, the 6th sense. And that 6th sense is the consciousness. The second word the Buddha used to describe the mind is Mano. Mano is referring to what the psychologists would call the cognitive process, or the plain simple English word would be thinking, right? The cognizing, cognition, thinking. And it leads to cognition and conception. That means when we experience the environment through the perception, we become aware of an object, then we begin to react to, we begin to feel the object, and we begin to interpret what that object is. And the first thing that does is that we assign a name, a label to call that object. So if I were to show you this, straight away, you know this is a mouse, even though you have not seen this mouse before. All of you have not seen this mouse before. But the moment you see this, you know straight away this is a computer mouse. Because your mind has categorized, grouped them in the mind. That's why it's called categorized identification. That all the mouse look similar, so you group them. The moment you see something like that, you straight away interpret it and call it a mouse. Calling it a mouse, the word mouse, that is the nama. Having the image of this mouse, when your eyes see it, that is the rupa. And this process of interpretation is papancha. And with this, we begin to cognize what we have seen. And we create concepts. So cognizing the experience, this is called the Dhamma. The word Dhamma here is used to refer to the experience of seeing, cognizing. Actually, the word Dhamma in Pali has many meanings, but the most important meaning is it is referring to experience. And in fact, that's what the Buddha was teaching. The Buddha came to earth and taught the whole world his experience. He was not bringing the truth from somewhere else, like some other religions say that God spoke the truth. No, the Buddha did not bring the truth from heaven or from anywhere else. The Buddha was teaching us his experience. That's why that is called the Dhamma also. So in other words, we begin to cognize that experience and create concepts. Concepts means story. Right? So when you see this, you begin to think, oh, it's a blue mouse. I like blue mouse. So thinking that it's a blue mouse, you like blue mouse, that is a concept. So we create two things, concept and choices. The moment you see this, you think of it, oh, I like blue mouse. Then you have a choice. Oh, this is so cute. Maybe tomorrow I will go out and buy a blue mouse. Then you're creating a choice. So the mind is creating concepts and choices. Right? So this is really the activity of the cognitive process, what we normally call the thinking mind, cognition and conception. But the Buddha also used a third word to describe the mind. He called it Chitta. Chitta, the psychologists refer to it as affective process, or the common layman's term would be emotions. We think of it in terms of emotions. But really what is happening is that it leads to mood and temperament. Mood is how you feel about it. So in other words, when you experience something and you give it a name and you create the concept, you begin to feel. And this feeling is Vedana. If it is something pleasant, you feel good about it. If it is something unpleasant, you don't like it, you feel bad about it. So this feeling leads to a mood, right? And then you begin to want to react. You have the urge to react, the urge to react, wanting to react. That's your temperament. And that reaction is called tanha. Tanha is really your emotional reaction to how you feel about what you have experienced. But unfortunately, many people translate tanha as craving. It's really not so much craving, but it is your reaction, the urge to react, the thirst to react. Tanha is sometimes translated with the notion that it is a thirst. Well, that is not the thirst for wanting something. That is the thirst for reacting to something. Because if it is unpleasant, why would you want it? So you react to it. If it is unpleasant, you want to push it away. That is your thirst to push it away. Your tanha is your emotional reaction to the feeling of what you have experienced. And it leads to your mood. Mood means how you feel about it. Oh, you like it, you feel good. If it is unpleasant, you don't like it, you feel bad. Temperament is this urge to react. And that's why when people react badly, we call them, oh, you're having a temper. You know, this is your temper. You're reacting badly. This is what it is all about. But not only that, the Chitta also personalizes every experience. Now, this word Upadhana means personalizing. But of course, it is commonly translated as clinging, grasping, attaching. But a more precise meaning, this is one of the most beautiful things that Bhante Punaji has taught us, and he uses very precise meaning. So the very precise meaning of the word Upadhana is personalizing. When we experience something, as I told you before, the mind breaks that experience into object and subject, and because of that we begin to personalize, you know, that experience. If it is something pleasant, then we say I like it. If it is something unpleasant, I don't like it. What's the first word? I. You see, that personalizing it. And this leads to a very self-centered existence. The mind is thinking of existence because it is thinking of subject and object. And that's why the mind is locked on to existence. And this is bhava tanha, right? The reaction to want to exist. So this is really what's going on. The mind personalizes, clings on, grasp, attached to that experience. Right? Before I go further, I just want to explain this word Upadhana, often translated as grasping. Why did Bhante call it personalizing? Because you have to break that word into the root word. Upadhana actually made of two key words, upa and adana. Upa means bringing it inside, or the inside, right? So bringing something inside is called upa. Adana is the opposite of dana. So what is dana? Dana is giving. So when you give, it is dana. In Pali, when you have the a in front of a word, it gives the opposite meaning of that word. So in other words, adana means taking. So when you experience something, you take it, bringing it inside. That's why Bhante calls this personalizing. When you experience something, then you take the whole experience inwards and say, I like it, I don't like it. Common example, you go to the shopping mall and then your neighbor comes along from a distance, you see that neighbor, you recognize him, and then what is the first thought that comes to your mind when you see a neighbor that you recognize? The first thought is, I see my neighbor. That's what it is. So that is the I. Then see the neighbor. Neighbor is the object. I is the subject. So we always break experience down to subject and object. Right? We don't realize that there is only the experience. So that is really why Upadhana is personalizing the experience. So now let's quickly examine the Four Noble Truths and look at how it is connected to these three terms, especially talking about Mano, the thinking mind, and Chitta, the emotional mind. Okay. In the first Noble Truth, the Buddha was referring to 8 conditions of suffering. The first 4 are very straightforward: birth, aging, sickness, and death. These are suffering. Then the Buddha says separation from what is pleasing is suffering. That means we experience something pleasant. Now we have lost it. We no longer have it. That is suffering. Simple example. What is one object you use a lot and you like it a lot, and if you lose that, you're going to get very angry. You're going to get very hurt. It's your cell phone. Everybody has one. What would you do? What happens if you lose your cell phone? Are you happy? Of course not. So separation from what is pleasing, that is suffering. Union with what is displeasing. That means you have an experience that is unpleasant. You don't like it. It hurts you. And then you're stuck with it. Then that is suffering. For example, you wake up in the morning and then there is a headache. You feel the headache. So having a headache is displeasing. It is unpleasant. It is not nice. But you're stuck with it. You can't get rid of the headache. You try to take Panadol or take paracetamol or whatever. The headache does not go away. You're stuck with it. Then that is suffering. So in other words, something unpleasant, you can't get rid of it. That is suffering. Then the next one is talking about having a desire, a wish, wanting something, right? Hoping for something. For example, if you're working for an employer, you wish to get a promotion. You wish to get a pay increase, right? Every year you wish that you get a big jump in your salary. You wish that you get a promotion from junior staff to senior staff to supervisor, supervisor to become manager. You wish for those things in your career path. But it didn't happen. Your employer is very nasty, never promote you, never give you much pay rise. So you are really not happy with not getting what you want, not to get what you want. That is suffering, right? But the last one is the mother of all suffering, right? And using Bhante Punnaji's translation, in brief, personalizing the 5 constituents of the process of perception is suffering. This is referring to the 5 aggregates. When we experience these 5 aggregates, we personalize them. And as we personalize them, right, everything we see, we begin to say, I see. And then we begin to think about it and reflect upon it and contemplate it. And then we remember it. What you've seen now goes into your mind. So you have to be very careful. If you keep thinking about stuff that you see and you get enjoyment or thrill out of seeing nice stuff, or you become angry when seeing something unpleasant, it pollutes your mind. This is really causing pollution in the mind. This is the process by which your mind get polluted. If you personalize, cling on, grasping everything you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, because it came from the word pancha upadana kanda. Pancha kanda, the 5 aggregates. Upadana is this personalizing, the clinging, the grasping. This is the mother of all suffering, because every time we experience something, we cling on to that experience, whatever we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and that pollutes your mind. If it is whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, it pollutes your mind. And for example, you tasted a food that is very nice, you enjoyed that food, and you think about it, ooh, this is such a nice plate of food, how I wish I'm going to get it again. Let's say you went for fried noodles or fried rice, most common, every country has it. So you tasted a very nice plate of fried rice, and you think about it, oh wow, this plate of fried rice is so tasty. Now if you keep reflecting on that, your mind now begin to yearn for it. Your mind begin to remember it and recall it. Oh, how I wish I can have that fried rice. Now, if your friend invites you to the house and serve you a fried rice that doesn't taste as good, then your mind begins to compare. Oh, this friend's fried rice not as nice as the one I had the other day. You know, all this is suffering, right? So now these are the 8 conditions of suffering. This is the last one, as I pointed out. This is the mother of all suffering. We got to be very careful when we experience something through our senses. Don't grasp onto it. Don't cling on to it. Let it go. You have had a nice plate of fried rice. After it is finished, it's over. Let it go. Right? Don't keep recalling it. This has to be understood. The 8 conditions of suffering in the first noble truth has to be understood. Now let's listen to Bhante explain about this mind being polluted. And this pollution of the mind is called Asava. Asava comes from a Sanskrit word srava. Right? So Bhante will explain that.
Now even the word Asava is wrongly translated. The Asava means, it starts with the root of that word is sru, is sru. Now sru means a sound that indicates the flowing. Now if water is flowing, we say, oh, it's flowing, suru, 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 suru. That is flowing. You see? So sru is to flow. Now, in the Pali language, we say going is called gacchati. Gacchati is going. Coming is called agacchati. That prefix a is coming. Agacchati means coming. Gacchati means going. So you see, in a similar way, the sru is to flow. Sru is to flow back, coming. So there is a flowing out and the flowing in. So asava really means flowing in from outside, coming in. Asava. But today the commentators, they explain the sru as something flowing out.
Just also, you have just now very clearly explained the word asava, meaning the inflowing of disturbances that influence us. So it's an influence. I just want to highlight there are some books which translate asava as the outflow of reaction, which actually is the opposite of the meaning of asava.
Yeah.
Asava is actually the inflow of disturbances that cause us to be influenced by it, right?
That's why I use the word influence.
Yeah, influence.
Influence.
Yeah, because of inflow. But some teachers have said that it is an outflow of reaction. And that is not correct, Bante. Yeah. So the word asava is often mistranslated. In fact, I was at a sutra study class just the last few days, and the word asava was translated by the teacher as outflow, thinking that asava is this outflow of the pollutants, what has contaminated the mind. But actually, the real meaning of asava, as Bante pointed out, is influence. Srava refers to water flowing. So normally when we talk about water flowing, we're talking about flowing away. We don't talk about the river is flowing towards me. We're talking about the river is flowing towards the ocean, flowing away. So Asava, which is the opposite direction, flowing towards us. So this is referring to influences that pollute the mind. That means things that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch are constantly being grasped onto and polluting the mind if we keep recalling it. We may see something unwholesome, but if we keep thinking about that unwholesome thing, it pollutes the mind, For young men, you see a sexy picture, and then you keep thinking about how sexy that picture is, then your mind gets polluted with sexy thoughts, that kind of thing. So this is how the mind gets polluted, and that's why we need to do something about that. The second noble truth. So why do we experience suffering? And the Buddha pointed out three big reasons, right? And he says, basically the Buddha pointed out, we suffer because of our tanha. Tanha, commonly translated as craving, right? Tanha, which leads to renewed existence, that means rebirth, re-exist, accompanied by delight and lust. So when we're always seeking for pleasures. Now, the real meaning of tanha is really emotional reaction, commonly translated as craving. But tanha is referring to the way we react. And there are three kinds of emotional reaction. The first is tanha for sensual pleasures. And this is really called kama tanha. Kama refers to sensuality. Right? So emotional reaction towards pleasant experiences, sensual experiences. The second one is, this is really what is also the behavior part. This is the outflow. The behavior is called lobha. And that is having the lust and greed towards, for pleasures. The second type of tanha is tanha for non-existence. That means it is an unpleasant experience. And this is called the vibhava tanha, emotional reaction to unpleasant experiences. If it is something unpleasant, we want to get rid of it, we want to push it away. And this behavior is called dosa, which refers to aversion and hatred towards these pleasures. And the third type of tanha is really tanha for continued existence. And this is called bhava tanha, the emotional reaction to existence. Every time we experience something through our senses, we begin to think, I see this. So we're creating the notion of I exist. There is this notion of a subjective self in here that is experiencing the world out there. That's why this is bhava tanha, clinging on to this notion of existence. And this leads to moha. Moha is the delusion of a self-centered existence. So there you have it, the three types of tanha, the causes of our suffering. Because firstly, if it is something pleasant, we lust and greed for it. If it is something unpleasant, we try to avoid it, or we develop hatred towards it. And whatever that is experienced, we cling on to that experience and we create the delusion of a self-centered existence. And these are the causes of our suffering. The primary root cause of all suffering is tanha, commonly translated as craving, but the real meaning is emotional reaction. So that's really the reason for our suffering, the causes of our suffering. we have to learn to abandon them. So in other words, we train ourselves to let go. When we experience something pleasant, don't think about it, don't grasp onto it, let it go. You had a nice meal, that's it. When it's over, let it be, it's over. Or you experience some suffering, and when you are cured from it, okay, it's over, let it be, don't think about it. Otherwise, you will fall into PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety, anxiety syndrome. Right? Learn to let it go, to be abandoned. And if you are able to do all that, and that's what the third noble truth is referring to, that you have freed yourself from suffering, that suffering can be brought to an end. Nirodha. Nirodha means cessation, the ending, right? And here it is describing what happens when one becomes enlightened. This is really referring to the Arahant. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of tanha. That means there's no more emotional reaction, right? So tanha, emotional reaction. We learn to give it up. We give up all reactions. We relinquish. We don't want to control it. We let it go, right? So this emotional reaction. Then we become free from it, free from emotional reactions. And when we become free from emotional reactions, we do not depend on it. But unfortunately, people rely on emotional reactions for their happiness. We can be happy without emotional reactions altogether, but people rely on emotional reactions for their happiness. That's why they get reborn over and over again. So here, a person who is able to attain this stage, this is the Arahant, the person who has become enlightened, that he has given up and relinquished all emotional reactions, that he has become totally free from emotional reaction of any kind. Therefore, he is not creating karma. And now he is no longer dependent on any kind of emotional reaction. That is the third noble truth. And basically, the third noble truth is to be realized. We have to realize that we have to help ourselves accomplish this. In other words, this is the goal to be accomplished. The third noble truth is really referring to a goal to be accomplished, to be realized, to manifest in ourselves, right? And then the fourth noble truth is talking about the way leading to the cessation of all suffering. So the Eightfold Way, I always like to present it in this way, in a circular form, because it is a continuous cycle, continuous improvement cycle. We begin with having right view, and that leads us to feel confident in the Dharma, and we become devoted to it. And when you are confident in something and you become devoted to it, now you are a Buddhist devotee. You're devoted to the Buddha Dharma. And then you want to do something about it, and that's the second one, right intentions. And that leads you to motivate yourself, and you have this virya. So this confidence and devotion is saddha. Unfortunately, saddha is often translated as faith, like as though it is blind faith. It is not blind faith. It is the confidence and devotion of the Buddha Dharma. And then you have this motivation to want to do something, the vidya, the energetic motivation to want to do something. And when you want to do something, you begin to practice. And so now the yellow part is the intellectual part, right? This is collectively referred to as saddha, the devotion to want to practice the Dharma. When you practice the Dharma, you move on to the blue part. And this practice initially is the practice of sila. And that is cultivating virtuous morality by right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Doing that is what is really the purification of the body. When we say purification of the body, we're talking about the way we behave. So this is really the discipline of behavior. And for a lay devotee, then it is abiding by the 5 precepts. That's the minimum. Of course, there are more. Some people take the 8 precepts. Some people take the 10 precepts. Some people become a monk, they renounce. Then they have a couple of hundreds of precepts to follow. So this is basically abiding by the 5 precepts is the minimum practice that helps us to practice right speech, right action, right livelihood. And when we're able to do that, then we can go on and deepen our practice and start to learn how to meditate. So the next part is the meditation part. The next part is the meditation part, the part in green. This is the purification of the mind by developing insight, developing wisdom, the ability to see through the realities of life. And the ability to see through the realities of life is seeing through what is anicca, and that is impermanence, what is dukkha, and that is suffering, and what is anatta, that there is no self to contend with. And this is by investigation of the cognitive experience. This is the highest level of cultivation, investigation of this cognitive experience. You begin with meditation by calming, relaxing, and composing the body, and then calming the mind. This meditation is called samatha. And then you begin to cultivate insight into the realities, and that is the vipassana meditation. So basically, this is to be cultivated, right? So we have to cultivate this eightfold way. This is the practice of the Buddhist. And this is how we can learn to be free from all suffering.